Welcome. I'm Erin Penn, a developmental editor and submission reader for Falstaff Books. We are a small press publisher in the Carolinas, specializing in genre fiction, such as science fiction, fantasy, mystery, horror, and a little romance from our Falstaff Crush line. This video is part of my Editing Rants, what to do and what not to do to make your writing better. Today we're going to talk about types of editing. I've already mentioned I'm a developmental editor and submission reader, also called a slush reader when the submissions are unsolicited. In my first video, I also mentioned I've previously worked as a line editor for other publishers. None of these types of editing are proofreading, which is what most people think about when someone talks about editing. Based on their middle school and high school experience, that's what most people think is editing. When writers go out looking for editors for the first time and they get that first round of response back, they tend to be a little shocked at what they see. So let's define the stages of editing. Typically, they fall into three categories: macro, micro, and grammar Nazi. Nitpicking? Proofreading. Let's go with proofreading. You know what it is. Macro editing is big picture. Does the story start in the right place? Do you have enough characters to tell the story? Does the story sag in the middle? Has the right POV, point of view, been chosen to tell the story? Macro editing is details, coming down a level, more about paragraph and sentence structure. Do several sentences in a row have the same words? Are overused words overused? Are setisms taking over your manuscript? Does the verb tense or POV switch while you're reading? Proofreading, like I said, you probably are familiar with it. That's more fact-checking, grammar, formatting. Are the distances correct, like I talked about last time? Are you using the Oxford comma? Oh, please use the Oxford comma. It's such a beautiful thing. Are words breaking in the right place between pages, such as Butterfingers? You hyphenate Butterfingers in the wrong place, and people revert to 5th grade. Now, most publishers won't use words like macro editor, micro editor, or nitpicker in the titles for their editors. On top of that, nonfiction and fiction publishers use different terms. Basically, wherever you go, you just got to figure out what the publisher means by each stage. You'll run into terms like developmental edits, substantive edits, line edits, copy edits, formatting pages, proofreader, beta reader, critique partners, draft edits, slush readers, content editors, galley proofs. The list just goes on. But the important thing to remember is the editing process is working from broad to detailed. At the macro level, the change will permeate through the entire manuscript, requiring rewrites of entire chapters, or maybe just scattered throughout the book. Like you're going to need to make a couple changes in chapter 3, chapter 17, and chapter 29 because of a timeline issue. At the micro level, an author is rewriting paragraphs or sentences. The proofreading level, you're down to making changes for commas and fixing spellings. Again, most people are well familiar with proofreading, and they've learned they can't proofread their own mistakes. This is because you can't see it. But micro and macro editing as well is equally important. Those level of fixes don't make you not look stupid, like not knowing how to spell complementary versus complementary. Trust me, it's a mess. English. That level of fixes for macro and micro editing is where you try and keep the reader from being bored or confused. After spending all that time on a manuscript, an author wants a reader to enjoy it, right? Speaking of enjoying, if you enjoy these videos and want them to continue, don't forget to like, subscribe, and support if you can. There is a Patreon thing popping up on the bottom. And at Falstaff, we get a lot of editors publishing. So, because working with a small press gives the editor an opportunity to do something in between their major projects. One of the best examples for us is something called This Giant Leap. It's a collection of short stories by the amazing editor and short story writer Edumund R. Schubert. If you want to meet someone who knows every stage of bringing a short story to publication, Mr. Schubert is your man. For 10 years, he served as the head editor for an online bi-monthly magazine called the Intergalactic Medicine Show, working with hundreds of authors at every stage of the editing process to bring fantasy and science fiction short stories to press. The man is amazing. And this giant leap contains the skill he developed over all those years holding a red pen. I really like the commentary on each piece, telling a reader what influenced the story. Yeah. So back to defining editing. I will go over the full lifespan of a manuscript in a future episode, likely season 2. If you want to see episodes at a faster pace than once a month, go to the Erin Penn Patreon. And if you have a particular topic you want to see in the rants, you can put them below in the comments section, and I will try and include them in future seasons. Every season is going to be 12 episodes, and I'm trying to work out the first season just to see how it goes. But future seasons, I will have much more feedback between me and the audience. Hopefully, I will have an audience. And again, like and subscribe. Let me know I have an audience. Thank you. So, you got a manuscript. It's ready. You know it's ready. So you send it off to a publisher. The first editor you will run into when submitting manuscripts to a publisher is the submissions editor. Like I said, I do some submissions editing. This editor at a publisher reads the 3-chapter submissions. Most publishers ask for a 3-chapter taster to look things over first. If that captures their attention, then they'll ask for a full manuscript. Score! You got a full manuscript in someone's hands. From there, they'll either send a standard rejection or a personalized rejection. 99% of the time. But if you're in the 1%, and what I'm trying to do with these editing rants is get you into that 1%. They'll push it upstream to a book buyer who will make the final call. The submission editor doesn't get to make the final call. They get to say, this is something that we can work with. They're looking at the manuscript and the author based on the cover letter and what they're saying within the manuscript. And they're thinking these a couple things, three things. One, can this manuscript and author be worked with based on what I'm seeing here and what I know from the greater community? Because we do talk to each other. Two, does this particular manuscript match the house feel and needs? This includes the length of the manuscript. When we say our sweet spot is 70 to 90,000 words and you send us 150,000 words, yeah. So, and third, can this book, in my humble opinion, or whoever is reading your document, can that book be sold to a reader? If any one of these three things come back as a no, the manuscript is rejected. And remember, the house needs can be very specialized. Some publishers only publish science fiction and particular types of science fiction. One of the publishers in North Carolina specializes in military science fiction. You send them space opera and it's not going to be accepted. So, when you receive a no, it's not that your manuscript is bad. It's just your manuscript doesn't fit the needs of that publisher. We'll talk more about rejections and how to handle them and how to make decisions on what you need to do with your manuscript from there at another time. That's a whole nother 20 minutes, half an hour, days, years conversation. So you've been accepted. The book buyer has bought your book. The second editor touching your manuscript is the head editor. You might never communicate directly with this person. They oversee all the books in-house and assign them to editors at various stages. The person you will most likely communicate with next is the developmental editor. This person is going to rip your baby apart. I mean, the manuscript. At this point, you really need to stop thinking of the manuscript as your baby. You have sold it off via the contract that you signed with that book buyer. It is now a manuscript. You're changing into a product to be sold. Yay, you sold it. Well, you're in the process of selling it. If at any point you become too much trouble or the publisher becomes too much trouble, in that contract there should be I'm out of here clauses on either side, because sometimes the relationship you have entered into doesn't work. But back to that developmental editor who's taking apart your manuscript and making recommendations. They are, again, working on the macro level. They're looking at the point of view, the verb tense. Is it correct for the maximum enjoyment of a reader of this particular type of genre? Do you have enough or too many characters? Does the timeline work? And so on and so forth. You're likely to go through at least 2 developmental edit passes. Most new writers that I've worked with, when dealing with the small press level, go through 3 or 4 on their first book or 2. 2 passes are usually for people who are on their 10th published book. Experience helps. They have seen their normal errors and they've learned how to work around them. So the larger errors, things that they aren't aware of yet or haven't learned, those are the ones that are being found. What I'm doing with, again, the editing rants is going over a lot of what you're going to be found at the developmental and the line editing levels so that you don't have to do them anymore. You don't have to go through that pain of those things being found. They'll find something else. Editors will find something. So you've gone through 2, 3, 4 developmental edit passes. After that much grilling, you think you're done. But the head editor then passes your book on to the line editor. Falstaff calls them copy editors. I learned them first as line editors, so again, vocabulary changes. You're at the micro level here. You probably aren't going to talk to your developmental editor again. It's at a big press. What happens instead of the head editor shepherding your book throughout, the developmental editor shepherds your book throughout the house, and they're in charge of assigning the other people that you're going to work with. But at Falstaff and most small presses, the head editor does the assigning. And after you're done with your developmental editor, after developing that relationship of several back and forths, you're now dealing with someone else. So while your developmental editor has helped you try and catch as many of those line edits and proofreading errors as they could, they didn't focus on that level of editing, because when you're rewriting huge swaths of a manuscript, there is no reason to focus on the comma on line 3. So you now are in the micro edit stage, where they're doing the fact checking. They're seeing if things are consistent within a chapter, within a paragraph. Does the blue eyes and green eyes change colors? Are word choices correct? Do you really want a paragraph to be 2 pages long? Yeah, I get those. I personally love developmental editing because I really feel that I help make the book better at that stage. But I have the most fun when I'm line editing, because fact checking is like detail work, and I love detail work. So after your line editor is done, then you want to meet your proofreader. You're nearly done, mostly. This person is going for spelling issues, grammar, all of that stuff. It's time to break out the Chicago Manual of Style, your dictionary, your thesaurus, that shelf over there. Yeah, it's that stuff. This is my research library. I have a second library for the actual books that are fiction that I enjoy. This one is right by my computer, so it's all my research. And this is what the proofreader and your editors might be using for their fact checking and their grammar checking. The Chicago Manual of Style is the general one used by fiction. There is a different type of style used for research papers and a different type of style used for newspapers. So you need to know what your style of writing is formatted for. So you now have gone through, yay, developmental editing, your line editing, and your proofreading. All the editing is done, right? Yeah, no. You're probably never going to meet your format editor. This dude, in the case of Falstaff, takes the finished manuscript and translates it into all the versions of ebooks needed to get for publication. We're talking Kindle, Mobi, the PDF. There's, I don't know how many types of formatting you need to do for the ebook end of things. And then from there, they have to do the paperback and hardback, which have different page breaks. those versions as well. If you are working with a big house, you might get galley proofs at this time for the paper versions. Nearly all small presses don't have staff for that. Don't expect to do paper galley proofs. If you're lucky, you may get a first print-on-demand copy for your own personal review to make sure that the margins look okay. But yeah, this is one of the big differences between small house and big house, is what services, what staff they have for you. But as margins continue to close on the big houses, they're also figuring out where they can cut back, and they're looking at the small houses to see where they have cut corners and still produce a quality product. So now you're done, right? You got an actual book. Oh, yeah. But what happens if you want to do an audiobook? Yes! Guess what? There's another set of editors for that. You're going to need to create a script, maybe, based off of what you have. And so there's a script editor. And then you're going to have whoever is your reader is going to read it, and that gets edited by an audiobook editor, making sure that they say all the words that are in the script. And then that has to be formatted. So, yeah. Let's see how many people have actually touched your manuscript now that it's been bought, from the time that you sent it off to publication. Let's not go into the audiobook or the printing. Let's just stick with an ebook. So you have a submission reader, a book buyer, a head editor, a developmental, a line editor, a proofreader, a format editor. Seven people. This is why publishing tends to be considered slow. And why publishers need a chunk of the sales price to pay people. If you self-publish and you want to do it at this level of making sure everything's beautiful, you're going to pay these people out of your own pocket. It's why a lot of people want to go the publisher route. Well, I'm going off on another tangent. There's so much more to all of this. Today's focus was on the types of editing, just defining them. So macro, micro, and proofreading are the basic three that you as a writer need to consider and think about. If you are self-publishing, you're going to want to make sure that these are covered somehow. Critique partners can help you with that. I hope this video helps, and if it does, like and subscribe. Hang around to the end and see our featured book, This Giant Leap. And if you want to, put comments below to let me know what other topics you would like to see in future episodes. Thank you for watching, and travel well.